This is Steve Smith, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County webinar, 12 Basic Steps to Operating a Successful Small Business. I'm Steve Smith, the webinar coordinator and also a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host today. Our speaker and presenter will be everyone's favorite, Cliff Ennico. Cliff is a big friend of SCORE and does workshops and webinars for us. I'll tell you more about him, what he does in his spare time in just a minute. But first, just a little bit on SCORE. I promise to keep this to 2 to 3 minutes here. Most of you know already that SCORE is a national organization founded in the mid-'60s, specifically there to support small businesses get created and prosper. There are over 11,000 volunteers nationally. In Fairfield County, which includes basically Bridgeport down through Greenwich, not Danbury area, up in that direction. We have over 130 volunteers with various degrees of industry expertise, business process expertise, and deep subject matter expertise. We do really 3 primary deliverables. One is the workshop webinar program. That's what you're doing right now. And I'll tell you, we usually do, in 2019, we're probably going to do about 150 workshops and 25 webinars. We also do, as second value add, one-on-one counseling and mentoring at our offices at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk. And if you go to our website, which is fairfieldcounty.score.org, you'll see both a list of the upcoming workshops and webinars as well as how to get into and sign up for a counseling or mentoring session. The third thing you'll find specifically at the website, and our third value add is a long list of intellectual capital, frequently asked questions by small businesses as they get started and even while they're prospering about all kinds of different topics. And it's really a compendium of information to use at your disposal by going to fairfieldcounty.score.org. Okay, so getting into this a little bit deeper, this webinar will be recorded. Everybody wants to know that. It will be recorded and will be available at the website by the end of the day. If you give us till noon tomorrow, you'll be even more satisfied with what you find there. Our next webinar is August 7th, Tuesday, August 7th, and the subject is really, really hot one, digital privacy laws, or as you've probably seen the acronym bounced around the press, GDPR. And little known fact, but if you're doing business with somebody in Europe, you are subject to GDPR legislation. And that will be next Thursday. You'll be getting some reminders about that workshop so you don't have a chance to forget about it. I'm also going to remind all of you one more time that we do have a very, very popular program called Simple Steps for Starting Your Business, and our fall session is planning to start on September 6th at the Marone Hotel in Danbury. Yeah, a minute ago I said we were not in Danbury, but we are teaming with our brethren up there to perform this simple steps for starting a business. Also, at the Building 1 community in Stamford, starting on 9/13, there will be a simple steps for starting your business done in Spanish. So if that's something you'd like to see and attend, please sign up for either one, or both for that matter, at fairfieldcounty.score.org. Now, today's webinar is being recorded. I say this many times because I get many questions about it, regardless of how many times I say it. And we are going to end this webinar sharply at 1 o'clock today. We will have time for Q&A. If you'll notice, you've got a chat window in the lower left-hand corner where you can post your questions. And depending upon the flow of the information in the presentation, we'll either answer them right then, which I don't like to do, but if it's particularly topical to what Cliff's talking about at that time, I'll ask him to answer that question then. Or if not, we'll do it in the last 10 minutes of the presentation. You're also at the end going to be receiving an evaluation sheet for the quality of the webinar, and we really appreciate your input. And do take some time to fill that out. Now, our speaker. Some of you have heard Cliff speak before. There's no doubt of that. He is a nationally recognized small business and legal tax expert. He's probably best known for starting reality television. Well, at least that's what he says to me, with a host of a show called Money Hunt, which was on PBS some years ago, actually. In that show, entrepreneurs defended their business plan before America's toughest panel of experts. Sounds like, what is that show that's on it's on NBC? Shark Tank, exactly. I had a mental blank there for a minute. He's an attorney and small business consultant based in Fairfield, Connecticut. He's helped launch over 15,000 businesses, and he's the author of 16 books. Most recently, the Crowdfunding Handbook. Let me say it again, the Crowdfunding Handbook. How to raise capital for your business using equity funding portals. So, Cliff, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll be trying to end the presentation part about 10 minutes of 1 or something like that. Welcome back, and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Steve, very much. Always a pleasure to be a help to SCORE, especially with a program like this. I was just telling Steve right before we got online here that this is one of my oldest and dearest presentations. I've been doing this now in one form or another for 38 years, if you can believe that. It's changed a lot over the years, obviously, as people and the economy have changed. But the basics of running a business still are the same as they've always been. First of all, one little note: this is a 5,000 feet up program. I'm going to be going through a lot of stuff very, very fast and very quickly. I could easily do a 3-hour program on each one of the slides that you'll be seeing today. This is to give you a big picture of what it's like to start a business. We won't be drilling down very, very, very deeply. The one thing that Steve said in my introduction, which you do need to know, I am by training and education, although I assure you not by temperament, a lawyer. And now if you have any doubts whether I am a lawyer or not, take a look at this slide. Anything that I say is entirely my own responsibility. It does not reflect the views of SCORE or indeed anyone else. Legal and tax information, this is really the more important one. While I will be getting into some legal and tax stuff on this program, and I will try to give you a little bit of information about setting up your company legally, I don't know any of you well enough to be able to give you one-on-one advice. There's a big difference between saying this is what the law is and this is what you should do, Joe. So I don't know any of you well enough to be able to do that. So if you do listen to anything I say and it sounds like a great idea and you implement it and it goes badly and you end up losing your business, filing for bankruptcy, your spouse divorces you, your dog pees on your leg, your kids won't talk to you anymore, and you're living in a diaper box under the Brooklyn Bridge, it is not my fault. You clearly can't sue anyone or indeed anyone else at SCORE. On that cheery note, let's begin. Okay, this is a 12-step program, and like any other 12-step program, the first step is understanding that you have a problem. And the big problem here, of course, is that you want to start a business of your own. Any kind of business. It can be retail, service, consulting, something you do out of your house, something that will eventually be on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest-growing privately held companies in America. It can be anything. But before you take the 12-step program, you have to do a little bit of self-analysis. You have to ask yourself, are you the right kind of person to be doing this? Now, don't get me wrong. I do not believe that you have to have a certain type of personality to run a business of your own. I really don't believe that. I've been doing this work now for almost 40 years of my life. I have worked with tens of thousands of people who've started businesses of their own, some successful, some not. And I can tell you this, any kind of person can start a business. You do not have to have a certain personality type, type A. Sometimes it's the type A people who crash and burn and the more mellow people who tend to succeed. I mean, you can't generalize from this. However, I've been around long enough that I really do see certain qualities in my successful clients and the successful people that I work with that I don't see in my unsuccessful ones. And I boil it down to these three words. And for those of you who are interested, I have a YouTube video on this. If you go to youtube.com and search for my name, Cliff Ennico, you'll see all the stuff I have up there. Look for the one that says 3 personality traits. I do call it personality traits. Every successful entrepreneur needs to develop. This is where I talk about this in greater detail. But basically there are 3 ways of looking at the world. I won't call them personality traits that I think all successful people have to develop if they're going to be successful. The first is cynicism. Now this can confuse people a great deal. By cynicism, I don't mean being negative or being pessimistic, always looking at the glass as half empty rather than half full. Generally speaking, people like that do not make good entrepreneurs. You do need to have a certain amount of faith, I think, if you're going to be living outside your comfort zone 24/7. But cynicism is something else. Cynicism means looking at the world as it really is, without illusions, without rose-colored glasses. Seeing the world and looking at people especially as they really are, not as all good, all bad, but some combination of the two. This is very, very important when you do marketing, for example. If you don't really have a thorough grip on who your customers are and how they look at the world, what happens is you end up selling to stereotypes. And that's a very bad thing to do to people generally, but it's a very stupid thing to do when you run a business because stereotypes don't buy anything. Only real people do. You have to be cynical about the world around you and about what really is going on, not what you think is going on, not what your teachers told you or your parents told you what was going on, but things that you observe. Successful people are not intellectuals. They don't use their brains very much. They use their 5 senses instead. They soak up the world around them using their senses of sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch, and they basically adapt their behavior to what is going on out there in the real world, not what's going on between their ears. The second quality is insecurity. When we think of entrepreneurs, we like to think of them as very macho, self-controlled, type A, in control of their lives. And believe me, the truth is exactly the opposite. If I were to introduce 10 of my most successful clients in this room and bring them on this program and have them introduce themselves, you'd come away thinking, my God, these are 10 of the most neurotic people I've ever met in my life. I'm not so sure they're sure of anything. And you'd be correct about that. We all know what happens when people get too complacent and too sure of themselves. They stop looking at the world around them. They stop, soaking up information. They get lost inside their heads, and what happens there is that mistakes happen. Even big companies make this mistake. We can all think of at least one big company that isn't what it used to be because it didn't see changes in the marketplace, changes in technology, changes in people's behavior. We all can think of examples of that, and it happens to little companies as well. Being a little bit neurotic is extremely helpful. First of all, it helps you avoid threats before they become really serious. A little paranoia does help. But it also helps you spot opportunities before other people do as well. By being hyper-focused on your environment, you see things, you see trends happening before anybody else does, but you won't see them if you're just locked into the current way of doing business and just getting through the day. A little bit of fear is a good thing in running a business. Don't get me wrong, you don't want to be so paralyzed with fear that you can't do anything like a deer in the headlights, but being a little bit off-center on this can pay incredible dividends. Now, my last trait here, a lot of people are going to question this word. It's not a very nice word at all, but I suggest that you look it up online. It does not mean what you think it does. I am not at all suggesting that you be, God help me, that you be unethical or sleazy or in any way, do anything illegal or improper. If you look this word up online, it doesn't mean what you think it does. It doesn't mean any of that. Ruthlessness is just another way of saying heedless or reckless, going through life and not really worrying about the consequences of your actions, what other people think of you. A 2-year-old child is perfectly ruthless as a human being, and yet no one would ever say they were immoral or unethical because, of course, a 2-year-old child doesn't have any moral judgment. But if you do have a 2-year-old child, you do know that when they see something they want, they go for it, even though they know the consequences might be a timeout or whatever parents do to their kids these days. And let's face it, and that's the thing, getting to where you want to go and not worrying about the consequences to yourself, to others, what other people. We were all 2 years old at one point in our lives. Okay, what has happened to us is that life has socialized us away from that. Our parents, our teachers, our former employers, whatever, our score counselor, they're telling us all the time to hold back, to not, go for things just because we feel like it. We should analyze. We should do this. We should do that. And we've been socialized that way. To be successful in entrepreneurship sometimes means getting back to your inner 2-year-old, saying to yourself, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I will never be able to live myself if I don't do this. I'm going to go for this, and damn the torpedoes. I don't care what happens. I'll get where I want to go, and then I'll clean up whatever messes happen down the road. That is very often the difference between success and failure. People who hold themselves back or who worry too much about what other people think about them, who suffer from what we call paralysis by analysis, where they think too much about things, these are the people who never really achieve their dreams. Getting back in touch with your inner 2-year-old. Start hanging out with 2-year-olds, and you'll get a classic sense of what I'm looking for here. This is the beginning of it. Looking at yourself and asking yourself, do I have these? Do I care enough? For more information, watch my YouTube video. Once you've done that, now it's time to put together a business plan. Now, if you go to any bookstore or library in the United States, they will have a small business section. Look at that small business section, and I guarantee there'll be at least 50 to 100 books on how to write a business plan. There's tons of them out there. And I will tell you, they are all wrong. They are all incorrect. Well, I won't say that they're wrong, except, of course, for the one I wrote. But they are not really intended for people like you. If you're doing a startup tech company where you're going to be looking for venture capital at some point down the road, there's a very specific way those people like to see their business plan written. And that is what those books are all about, is how to write that kind of a business plan. For most of the businesses that you're thinking of starting, basic retail, service, consulting, whatever, you don't really need a business plan that looks like that. But you do need a business plan. And the business plan is nothing more than your best answer to these 12 questions that I'm going to be posing in the next half an hour to 40 minutes. Okay? And it's very important that you do this in order. The order of the questions is very important. When you look at the questions, you're going to say to yourself, well, geez, there's nothing new here. I've thought about this. I've thought about that. What's different and what makes my program a little bit different is the order. You think of these questions specifically in the order in which you are presented in this program, in which I'm presenting them. You start with question 1, and you don't even worry about the other questions. You do your homework until you eventually get an answer to question 1. Then you move on to question 2. You do the same thing. And if you get stuck on a question, you do not move on. That's one of the worst things you can do here. This isn't a time test. If you get stuck on question 4, you stop everything. You do not even think about question 5. You do your homework, you research, you analyze, you talk to people, you network, you do whatever until one of two things happens. Either you get the answer to question 4 that satisfies you, which enables you to move on to question 5, or, and this will happen 50% of the time, you realize that question 4 has no answer. It cannot be answered, and this is why the business idea is a bad one. This is why the business will fail, because it has a question 4 problem. This has nothing to do with you and how good you are or how much work you put into this. Some business ideas have fatal flaws in them, and this is how you screen them out. This is how you find them. If you can't get an answer to question 4, that's where the problem is, and that's why this business is probably not going to work the way you think it will. What you're doing here is screening out bad ideas with each of these 12 questions. So let's start going through the questions. We begin, first of all, with marketing. And question 1, who are my target markets? Now, some of you are saying, well, wait a minute, isn't there a question before that? Isn't the question, what is the product or service? The answer is no. believe it or not, you do not need to have a specific product or service in mind to know who your target markets are. Okay? Your customers are not everybody. Okay, every once in a while I'll meet somebody, what's your business? Okay, here's the idea. Who are your customers? Everybody. Well, that's not really true. Your customers are not everyone. You're going to find when you're in business, certain people are out there that will buy just about anything from you. There are certain people who try as you might, you can't get through to. You simply cannot sell to them because they just don't get you, or they just don't get the idea. It's kind of like high school, actually. When it was in high school, did you ever notice you tried to make friends with certain people, and no matter how hard you tried, nothing would happen there? In my case, in my high school, those people were called cheerleaders. I just could not get through to those people at all. Yet there were certain other people who, all I had to do was show up, and they were all over me. They got me instantaneously. We call these people natural customers. These are people who would buy anything from you. Who are these people? You don't get me wrong, they're not the only customers you will ever have, but they're a great place to start. Who are the people you know well and have walked a mile in their shoes? I don't care whether you like them or not. I mean, if you really don't like lawyers, it doesn't really make a difference. You can maybe sell very effectively to lawyers. You don't have to like them. You don't have to love them, but you do have to know them. You have to have walked in your shoes. One of the exercises, I used to teach a class on this at a local community college, and one of the very first questions I used to ask was, name 10 groups of people that you feel you know so well you can step in their shoes and look at the world the way they do. And you think it's going to be the easiest thing in the world. Try it. Sit down tonight with a pen and paper. Guarantee that pen's going to be sitting in the air for at least 20, 30 minutes while you think of, well, really, who do I know? It's one of the hardest questions you'll ever be asked by anybody. But it's a very important question when you're trying to market to people. Who do you know? People who are simpatico. They get you, you get them. They may not look anything like you at all, but there are certain reasons why certain people are attracted to you and certain people are not. And we'll talk about that in a minute, actually. Avoid selling to stereotypes. This is what I said earlier. When you don't really know the people you are selling to, if you don't really know them well enough that you can really crawl inside their head and look at the world through their eyes, you end up selling to stereotypes. Well, those kind of people, they probably are going to be like, and when you start doing that, it's a very bad thing. First of all, it's not a nice thing to do to anybody anyway, but it also will not get you sales. Stereotypes don't buy anything. Real people do, and you really have to understand who they are as people. I'll give you some tips, some specific tips on that in a minute. Now we move on to question 2. Right now all we have is a list of people. I got this list of 37 groups of people that I think I know pretty well. Okay, now what you do is you go down that list and you ask them, why will they buy anything from me? What motivates these people to buy? Now, here's a dirty little secret, and this is a secret that's taken me decades to learn, and I give it to you absolutely free for nothing, thanks to SCORE. There are 2 reasons, and only 2, in this entire world why anybody buys anything. There's only 2 reasons in this world why you've ever bought anything. There's only 2 reasons in this world why I have ever bought anything. Because as a consumer, as a customer, I'm no smarter than anybody else. You can use these techniques to sell to me. And if you've had any kind of a business background, you probably have been told that these 2 things are needs and wants. Do not write that down because it is absolutely incorrect. It is wrong. One of the dirty little secrets you will find when you go out in business for yourself is people seldom, if ever, buy things because they need them. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, at a certain level, people need food. If we don't eat, we die, okay? But whether you satisfy that hunger with a Big Mac quarter pounder with bacon and cheese, or a plate of raw steamed broccoli, has a lot to do with other things that go beyond needs. Okay, there are 2 reasons, and only 2, why anybody buys anything, but they're not needs and wants. What they really are: fears and passions. If you've got a product or service that turns people on some way, that helps them enjoy life more in some aspect, they will buy from you. Examples, whole industries have been based on people's passions. Sporting goods. Unless you have a basement full of rats, you do not need a golf club in your basement. Okay? Yet if you know golfers, these people are extremely passionate about their game. They will spend thousands of dollars on a titanium driver that will give them 2 inches more off the tee than they've got before. Okay, that they are. Sporting goods. Anything to do with entertainment, media, novels, plays, music, and any kind of music. And we don't need these things in our lives. We have them in our lives because we're passionate about them. Some people are passionate about classical music, others hip hop. It doesn't make a difference. Passions. If you have trouble thinking of passions, by the way, another thing, addictions are passions. Let's talk about some stuff that's not so nice. Let's talk about alcohol. Let's talk about pornography. These things are not nice to talk about, but addictions are passions. One of the best things that can happen to you if you have a product-centered business is for people to become legally addicted to your product. Okay, Starbucks coffee, anyone? Don't get me wrong. These are not nice things to talk about, but they are passions. If you're having trouble thinking of passions, think of the 7 deadly sins. Okay, think of the 7 deadly sins. Let's see. Do I have a slide on this? I don't think I do. Hang on. No. Okay, I got to stay here for a second. Okay. It does not prevent me from going backwards. Okay. If you're having trouble thinking of passions, think of the 7 deadly sins. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying that these are in any way sinful. These are just 7 things, emotions, 7 qualities that we all have as human beings, and most of us have at least some of them. So let's go down the list. Pride, anything that makes you feel better about yourself, anything to do with self-improvement. Lust, no secret there. Sex sells a lot of stuff. Greed, I got this hot new mutual fund that'll produce 12% per annum, no matter what the economy is doing. That's how Bernie Madoff sold all those poor people. Envy, I got something you don't have. Somebody driving a Lamborghini to and from work each day is not being motivated by a basic need for transportation. There's something else going on with that person. Anger, negative political ads that make you hate the other party's candidate so much that vote for anything that is not that person. Sloth, which is laziness, anything that makes your life more convenient. Helps you stop using your body parts, remote controls for all your appliances, those wonderful things where you can feed your dog pet treats now, even though you're 1,000 miles away. It's wonderful, the wonderful little thing. And then, of course, last but not least, gluttony, which is eating and drinking too much. And any of you who've ever met me in person knows that this is one that I have had some particular experience with in my profession. I will be happy to offer you very specific counseling for a small fee. Let's talk about fears for a moment. This is the other set of emotions that guide buying behavior. If you've got a product or service that helps people sleep better at nights, that helps them to stop worrying or worry less about things, they will buy. In fact, studies show that in down economies, in negative economies where things aren't so great, people will still spend money on things that will help them reduce their fears, even though they're not spending as much on their passion-driven activities. Fears. Insurance is a good example. Nobody needs insurance, but if you're worried about your family being left destitute because you board the wrong airplane, you will buy insurance. Home security systems, burglar alarms. You ever see the ads for those things? It's always the same ad. It's a house in the middle of nowhere. There's a creep trying to break into the house with a ski mask, and the only 2 people in the house, the only 2 people for miles around are a young mother bathing a baby. I mean, they really do the best to scare the crap out of you. It's like a bad horror movie that they do. Lawyers. Let's talk about lawyers for a minute. I mean, I'm in a fear business. When was the last time you called your lawyer when you were having a nice day? This does not happen, people. The 2 people you never call when you're having a nice day are your lawyer and your orthopedic surgeon. Okay. Generally speaking, when you call your orthopedic surgeon, something is not exactly sticking in your body the way it should. It's sticking out, usually at a very odd angle. When people call their lawyers, something really bad is happening in their lives, which is why they're calling me. So these are the 2 reasons why anybody buys anything. I'm going through this very, very quickly. For those of you who want more of this, I do have a YouTube video called How to Sell Just About Anything to Just About Anybody, where I go into this in a bit more detail. It may take a little bit of resistance here for you to overcome. A lot of people say, wait a minute, it can't be that simple. It is, trust me. In 38 years of doing this, I have never had anybody come back and tell me that I am wrong about this. And I don't think it's ever going to happen again. Of course, they probably fear me because I'm a lawyer anyway, but never mind. Now we move on to question 3. Notice, by the way, the last few minutes we haven't said a single thing yet about specific products and services. All we're talking about are people, different kinds of people, and their fears and passions. And we do this for a reason, because this is where successful businesses come from. They do not come from your head. They do not come from ideas. They come from your observation of the people around you, their fears and passions, and specifically fears and passions that are not being addressed by other products and services in the marketplace. Okay, this is how I define need. Okay, in terms of what people are looking for. That people are having a passion for things and it's not being satisfied in the marketplace. That's where entrepreneurial opportunity is. Now we move on to question 3. What products and services can I develop with the resources available to me that will have and these are the key words, direct and unmistakable appeal to the fears and passions, we can fill these blanks in now, of my target markets. Okay? Generally speaking, and I actually do a lot of sales training. I talk to a lot of sales executives around the country for companies. The longer it takes time for people to think about whether or not they're going to buy your stuff, the likelier they will talk themselves out of it rather than into it. Your product has to hit, or service has to hit people between the eyes. They shouldn't have to think about it. The more they have to think about it, the more they'll find good reasons not to buy. I have actually spoken to salespeople who tell me when they talk to a new prospect, if they don't get an agreement within the first 10, 15 seconds, they move on to the next person, because they know that the more time they spend trying to explain the product, the benefits, the features, all that, they're going to end up talking themselves out of a sale, so they move on. Your product service appeal must be immediate. Believe it or not, most of the things you have ever bought in your life, you made up your mind within 10 seconds or less of seeing it. Believe it or not. People are natural impulse buyers. And don't get me wrong, whenever we see something we really want, the words that come out of our mouth, oh, wow, I really need this thing, whatever it is, but that's not really what's going on. What has happened here is that you have a fear, you have a passion, and a marketer has done a very successful job of getting that message across in seconds, to your brain. If you cannot explain your business plan to me within 10, 15 seconds, go back and try again. You have to be able to explain it in such a way that I get it and I want it very, very quickly. Okay. Question 4, this is the last of the marketing questions. Now that you know what your customers are, you know what their fears and passions are, you've come up with at least a couple of ideas for products or services that will directly appeal to them, that they will definitely reach into their wallets and buy today. Now you have to ask the question, what media will I use to reach my target markets? How do I get across to the people that I've identified as target markets? Well, the answer here is this question kind of cuts back to question 1. If you really know your customers well, if you know what and why they're going to buy, you also should know how they buy. Are they readers or are they visual people? Do they respond more to visual stimuli? I will tell you something about selling to lawyers. Lawyers do not believe anything unless it's in writing. So if you're going to sell something to lawyers, you've got to have print materials that they can read, study, and make an informed, balanced decision. They're one of the few people around that I know that don't really make decisions based on impulse, although wink, wink, they often do too, if they really want something. You have to have something in writing, that they can see. I mean, years ago I ran a company selling law books, believe it or not. And I always did, whenever I did a new book, I always did a glossy 8-page brochure with, the table of contents, the author's biographies, all this stuff, because that's what my readership wanted. Obviously, if you're selling to teenagers, that's the last thing you do. You give them an 8-page glossy brochure, they'll smoke the damn thing. So you don't want that. You have to know really who they are. Are they detail-oriented or are they big picture? Do they like flash or do they want just the facts? Are they Gen Z or millennials? I ask that question with a smiley face because if you know anything about millennials, especially if you have any living in your basement, hopefully you know they're there, they live on their smartphones. They are texting constantly 24/7. If you do not have a marketing message, a smartphone or social media presence, you will not reach this generation at all, period. World without end, amen. It sounds a little prejudiced, but seriously, try it. It's very difficult to reach this generation if you are not reaching them on their smartphones, because that's where they live. Okay, that's basically just common sense. Go where the customers are, not where they aren't. That's really the only message. So now we have a marketing plan. We know who our customers are. We know what the products and services are going to be. And by the way, you've just done something very interesting. You have let your customers tell you what products and services you are going to provide, and that is absolutely the right way to build a small business in terms of things. You do not come up with an idea and say, well, let's see who buys it. You have to know the customers are there before you launch, and this is how you do it. But we still don't know if we're going to have a successful business yet. Right now, all we know is that we have customers. That's all we know. Now we have to focus on competitors. Who's out there that could potentially hurt us, and how do we deal with that potential threat? Well, just like your customers are not everyone, your competitors are not everyone either. Believe it or not, your customers are not always people who are doing the same thing that you are doing. A lot of people think that. Well, who are my competitors? Well, they're the people out there that are doing the exact same thing I'm doing. And that may or may not be true, though. There may be somebody out there doing exactly the same thing that you're doing, but because he or she is targeting a different market, they're not competitors at all. They're not going to take a single sale away from you, even if they become wildly successful. Okay? Generally speaking, a competitor is someone who will hurt your sales if they are successful. And there are four kinds of competitors. I use this little two-box matrix to get this point across. Your competitors are either direct or indirect. A direct competitor is somebody who is indeed doing the exact same thing that you are doing, and for the same people. So, for example, if you have a pizza parlor on your local commercial strip, and there's a pizza parlor right down the street, that is a direct competitor. They're looking for the quick lunch market, and pizza is their product. But competitors don't have to be actual. They can be direct, rather. They can be indirect as well. An indirect competitor is someone who's targeting the same market that you are, the same fears and passions, using a different product or service. So if you have a pizza parlor on your local commercial strip, the pizza parlor down the street is a direct competitor. The Chinese takeout joint across the street, however, may be an indirect competitor. If someone's in your neighborhood and they're hungry for a quick bite to eat, they can either do a slice of pizza or an egg roll. They have that choice. So, even though the menu doesn't look anything like yours and their products are entirely different, the Chinese takeout place may be an indirect competitor in the quick lunch market. The lesson here, by the way, your competitors are defined not by what the product is. They are defined by the people, the customers that you serve. Anybody who's serving the same customers that you are and are dealing with the same fears and passions that you are trying to deal with is a competitor, regardless of what they are doing, whether it's the same or whether it is something else. The competitors can also be either actual or potential. An actual competitor is somebody who's actually in the marketplace today. They are already in business. They are already selling stuff. But you can't just look at them. You have to look at potential competitors as well. These are people who are who are not in your market yet, but they could get into your market, and if they did get into your market, they would wipe you out. These are people who are generally much bigger than you are, big box retailers, franchises, a giant public company. You can't just look at who's actually in your marketplace. You have to look at, so for example, if you have a pizza parlor on your local commercial strip, the pizza parlor down the street, the mom and pop place is an actual competitor, but Sbarro's, John's Brick Oven Pizza, Bertucci's, these are all examples of potential competitors. Competitors, these are chain Italian restaurants. If they ever got into your marketplace, they have full-service bars, 24/7 staffing. They deliver. They do all the stuff that a mom-and-pop pizza place cannot do. They probably will wipe you out. You got to ask yourself, where are these people? What's the likelihood that they're going to be in my market anytime soon? If you're looking to start a little hardware business, where's Where's the nearest Lowe's? Where's the nearest Home Depot? That's the kind of stuff you have to know about. Let's talk about this last part. Now, so my 4 boxes here combine these two concepts. A direct competitor, someone who's doing exactly the same thing that you are, and they're actually in business, we call these the enemies. Generally speaking, when someone says to me, hey, Cliff, I've really done research, I've done my homework, and I don't really have any competitors for this business, what they're really saying is, I've looked into this box, the enemies box, and I don't see anybody. And that may be correct. You may not have enemies as I define them for your particular business, but I guarantee if you look a little harder, you do have people occupying one of these 3 other boxes. The indirect competitor, someone who's not doing the same thing, but is actually in business, think of these as substitutes. If someone cannot afford your product or service, what could they substitute in lieu of your product or service? That's how you find these people. If people do not want to read a 1,000-page book on how to start a business, they can attend a 1-hour SCORE seminar or webinar. That's a good example of a substitute. A direct competitor who is not in your marketplace yet but could wipe you out, just think of big boxes, franchises, companies that are much bigger than you are that do the same thing and who have economies of scale that you cannot achieve. Last but not least, the indirect competitors of the future. These are very important competitors. This is not too theoretical. We're not talking here abstractly. There are people out there that are looking to change the whole way things are being done in this world. It's no secret that we are living in an increasingly digital world, and there are digital solutions to things that weren't available 5 years ago or even 2 years ago. Whenever you're looking to start a business, you have to ask yourself, will this business still be viable in 20, 30, 40 years? Or is something going to come down the pike, a digital something or a brick-and-mortar something, that's going to wipe me out? You have to look at this. I personally sold that law book company because I realized the Internet was coming, and I wasn't the person who could bring that business into the digital world. Someone else would have to do that, and I sold my company to somebody like that who could bring this company into the 21st century. Okay? Now that you've identified all your 4 types of competitors, you have to ask one of the key questions here: what is my competitive advantage? How do I beat these people? How do I beat the crap out of them and wipe them off the map? Well, the biggest thing that I have to say here, most people, when I ask this question, they say, oh, we're not worried about that. We're just going to give them better service. Yes, we know we have a hardware store and Home Depot is going to open up in our neighborhood, but we're not worried. Our customers will be loyal. We give them better service. We'll do much better than those guys in the orange aprons do. I have to tell you, that is the epitaph on the tombstone of thousands and thousands of small business. Well, I really thought the customers would stick with me, but they didn't. Okay? Again, you have to know what people are all about. Yes, people want better service, but you know what? They don't want to pay for it. There's something called showrooming, where people actually will go to a store, a brick-and-mortar store. They'll ask lots of questions about the merchandise, get all the information. They'll say they think about it. They go home, and then they go on Amazon, and they buy it for 20, 30% off. People are like that. Okay, and you got to be prepared for that. You may have a better product than your competition, but it doesn't have to be. More important to me, especially for a service business, do you have a better, more convenient location? Are you easier to get to? Who you are, your personality. Are you a member of a certain ethnic group? Or, there are some people who are more comfortable buying from a female than from a male. Sometimes it's just who you are that makes the difference between success and failure. I always tell people this: if you ever want to double your existing rate of business, I don't care what the business is, just add 3 words to your business card, your stationery, your website: se habla español. If you can do that, you will double your business overnight. The Hispanic community in the United States is very much underserved by a lot of different products and services, and believe me, they will flock to someone who speaks their language and will be willing to do business with them on their terms and who understand their culture. Last but not least, it could be your personality. Now, I'm a lawyer, and there's a million lawyers around. I mean, in Fairfield County here where I live, you can't throw a brick without hitting at least 3 lawyers. By the way, I do not recommend that. They sue people. It's just not a good thing to do. But seriously, yet I'm getting a lot of business these days, and a lot of them are not. And why is that? I think it's because, I do programs like this one. I have on my website a thing that says here, if you still have questions after reading all this garbage I put up on the web here, call me. I don't bite. How many times do lawyers do that? They invite you in. My profession doesn't do that. When people have legal troubles, they're afraid of being judged. And I tell them, I'm not going to do that. Hey, you have a legal problem? Great. That's what I do. I solve those problems. Come on in. I'm very inviting. And I think that's a big reason why I'm doing well in these days, and a lot of other lawyers are not doing so well. Sometimes it's just the way you conduct yourself, is the key to success. Okay. We still got 6 questions to go here, but believe it or not, they're less important. Once you know that you have a market, once you know that you can deal with the competition, you know who the competitors are, and you have effective strategies for dealing with them, the questions become less and less significant. Questions 7 and 8, do I need partners, and how do I pick the right ones? Now, we have to talk about people here. Based on the very first thing we did, the very first exercise we did today, that you are an absolutely cynical, neurotic, ruthless bastard. You are absolutely the sort of person who should be running a business of your own. But you have to go a question further. You have to acknowledge your limitations here. Can you run this business without partners? Here's how you do it. Every business has a handful of essential tasks that must be done perfectly or extremely well for the business to be successful. What you have to do here is you have to identify those essential tasks you cannot do yourself without help, and find people who can just do those essential tasks. Delegate everything else. My 2 essential rules here of management is you never delegate the essential tasks. You delegate all of the non-essential tasks. Okay? And to whom should you be delegating the non-essential functions of your business? That's question 8. Here are the 5 people. Every small business course says you got to have an advisory board. These are the 5 people you want to have on. You need a good accountant or bookkeeper, a good lawyer, not a litigator, not someone who fights lawsuits, but someone who can help keep you out of court, a very good insurance program to help you manage risks, a good mentor or 2 or 6. Here's where SCORE comes into being in a big way. Last but not least, your spouse or significant other. I'm not saying you should go into business with your spouse. I could do a whole class on that. But your spouse or significant other should at least know enough about your business that they can help you manage the personal way in which this business is going to affect your life. Businesses are like babies. They change your life. And while the other 4 people on your team on your advisory board will not care about that, your spouse or significant other will. Okay, let's talk about money. Now we talk about money. Where do you find money for a startup or early stage business? Well, I hate to say it. I hate to burst your bubble, but there's really 2 places, and only 2, where money comes for a startup business. Revenue from your customers, which is, we're talking gross revenue here, the number of things you sell multiplied by the price per thing, and the capital that comes out of your own pocket. Your home equity loan, your credit cards, if you do an SBA loan. SBA loans are always secured by a lien on your home, a second or third mortgage. So that's money. Any money that you put into the company is considered capital. And there is a how can I say it, an indirect relationship between these 2 things, an inverse relationship. The more revenue you can generate from your customers to pay the monthly bills, the less capital you have to put in from your own pocket to keep the business on life support. The very first question somebody like me is going to ask you if I meet you at a networking meeting is, what's your time to break even? How long is it going to take you to get to the point where your revenue from your customers is covering your monthly expenses? If you can answer that question in less than 12 months, you have a potential business here. If it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to get to that point, I think you need to reevaluate your business plan. Okay? Will this business make money? Okay. Here's how you answer the question. You need a little Excel spreadsheet for this. What you do is first of all, you project your expenses. What are you going to be spending money on? How much, monthly, quarterly, annually, and try to project it out for the next 12 to 18 months. Then when you've done that, when you've figured out all your business expenses, multiply each figure by 1.5 to 200%. Why do we do this? Because you're always going to miss stuff. And there's always going to be surprise expenses. You want to know this business will perform in a worst-case scenario. Then determine the amount of revenue you need each month to cover those expenses and break even. Then figure out how many units do you need to sell to reach the targeted revenue amount. If I'm looking to start a law firm, for example, doing wills, and I realize that in order to cover all my monthly expenses, I need $10,000 a month, and I realize that people are not going to pay more than $500 for a will. That means I have to do at least 20 wills each month in order to be able to break even. Now, is that feasible? Is that not? Well, it depends. If I'm living in a community of much older people, I might be able to get 20 wills a month. If I'm in a place that's mostly populated by young people, ain't going to happen. Question number 11, can I protect my business and my personal assets from lawsuits? Again, I have another YouTube video I'm going to point you to. Go to youtube.com, search for Cliff Ennico, and this is my 5 ways to avoid getting sued video. But this is the executive summary here. Form a corporation or LLC. By doing this, what you are doing is you are taking your personal assets off the table, but your business assets are still going to be liable and subject to attack. Whenever you create a corporation, think of a corporation or LLC as a wall that separates your business assets, the things you use in your business, from your personal assets, everything else. By putting that wall up, the personal assets are behind the wall and they're safe, but the business assets are still exposed. So you need to buy as much insurance as you can afford, commercial liability coverage, errors and omissions coverage. I go into the difference between that in my YouTube video. Put disclaimer language in all of your contracts and legal forms. Sometimes judges enforce them, sometimes they don't. Consider, if your spouse is not doing business with you, transferring assets into your spouse's name or a relative's. And last but not least, and this is so basic, don't do business with crazy people. Every time I have a client who has a problem and they say, you know what, Cliff, or they have a problem, a customer's not paying them or someone's threatening to sue them, the very first words that come out of their mouth, Cliff, I knew it. I knew this guy was going to be a problem. I knew this person was going to be tough to deal with. Your gut is a lot more sensitive than you think it is. You can spot the wackadoodles long before they become a problem. Don't do business with crazy people. Send them somewhere else, preferably to your worst competitor. Okay. Question 12, last but not least, how do I cope with taxes? Okay. Generally speaking, this is something you are not going to do yourself, but you need to be aware every business is taxed. Taxes are the government's way of saying thank you for a job well done. Poor people. Now, really, this is the truth. Poor people, homeless people on the street, they do not have tax problems. They got other kinds of problems like surviving, but they do not have tax problems in general. It's only people that are doing well have tax problems. So if you have tax problems, congratulations. You've done a magnificent job with your business. Hire a good bookkeeper or accountant. Even though you have these skills and you know how to do it yourself, it's always a good idea to have somebody because they have it. That's an independent set of eyes because they're not living in the business day to day. They'll see things. They'll see patterns in the numbers that you may not see because you're too busy just keeping the customers happy. It's always a good idea to hire a good bookkeeper or accountant for the first couple of years. Secondly, if you're in Connecticut, register with your state tax authority for income, sales, use, and other business taxes. Find out what the business taxes are in your state and make sure you sign up for them. They really do not like it when you start a business and you don't announce yourself to them. Last but not least, keep good records. The key to surviving any IRS audit or any state or local tax audit is to have good documentation and good paperwork. If you can back up everything that's on your tax return, you will not only survive your audit, you may actually come back with even more money than you had before. So those are the 12 steps. Here are a couple of books where I talk about a little bit more in detail about some of this stuff. I also have a YouTube video with almost 50 videos up there now. Some are long, some are short, that talk about specific aspects of starting up a small business. If you go to youtube.com, search for Cliff Ennico. I always go by Cliff, never Clifford. Never call me Clifford unless you really, really want to be sued. I'm only kidding about that. Or unless you're really, really mad at me. And then this is who I am, and this is really what I look like. So you now know what I meant when I said before about the whole gluttony thing. Okay. So without any further ado, I was actually able to get through the 12 steps. Let's open the floor and let's take some questions here.
Yeah, Cliff, thanks very much. This is back to Steve Smith here. Yeah, you did such a fantastic job that we don't have any questions at this point in time. But I will say that you spend a lot of time on the you can sell anything. Well, you and I call it you can sell anything to anyone. And I'll just note that if you go to our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, and look in the webinar archives, you'll find that Cliff did one sometime this year. I don't have the date right off the top of my head. So Cliff, you can read those as well as I can. And since we're running out of time here, but here's a question from Alicia.
Let me I want to get to the big one here, the one from Miss Franco. She's looking to set up a daycare center from home, and she doesn't have a lot of good credit, and let's put it this way. If you're looking for money from a bank or from the government, not having very good credit is going to be an issue for you. That's why I say that but the good news there is those people generally do not finance startup businesses. They don't it's very hard to get an SBA loan for a startup business unless you have real estate with a lot of home equity that they can tap into. That's what they're going to look at. They're not going to look at the business at all. They're going to look at the equity in your home as their collateral. Generally speaking, most money for a small business comes from two places. It comes from your customers, and it comes from the money that you are willing to put in via your credit cards, via loans from friends and family, and other places who will not care as much about your credit score. These are the places where most daycares get their money. They get it from relatives, and they get it from their customers, from the people in the neighborhood that are going to be sending their kids there. The bigger question is, do you have experience in daycare? Will people trust you with their children? Trust me. Look at this picture on your screen right now. Would you trust this man with a child under the age of 5? I don't think so. Okay? If you have the kind of face that frightens small children, do not go into the daycare business. It's just not going to happen for you. Those are the bigger questions you need to answer. If you're looking for a bank, for a daycare business with hardly any startup costs, you're doing it out of your home, I think that's the wrong way to go. Don't worry about your credit score. Look for get money from people who don't care about the credit score, who care more about who you are and what you're doing, and that's part of that's really where you should be looking for money, not from a bank at all for something like this. I saw a question. Okay, here we go. The tax registration. It's your state tax authority. In Connecticut, where we are here, it's the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services in Hartford. If you're in New York, it's the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance in Albany. Generally speaking, if you go online and plug in the name of your state followed by tax authority or revenue department, you probably will get the web page for your state tax authority. Every state in the union has a business registration form that you have to file. It's like a checklist. Basically, it lists all the taxes that you have to pay in that state, and then it's like a checklist. You sign up for the ones that apply to your specific business. It usually takes about 5 or 10 minutes. You can do it online. I might suggest that you have an accountant do it for you. If you're really confused by the questions, it's very easy to make mistakes on these things. You might be signing up for a tax that doesn't apply to you. Have your accountant do the form for you. They usually do it for no charge at all because what they want is your tax return business.
Let me. I just saw one here. I think. Let me answer this one. So Alicia, you asked the question about EU privacy laws. Rather than try to answer that now, let me direct you to our next webinar, which is going to be on August 7th, and it's specifically on that topic. And you will find that, yes, as a small business in the U.S., you will be affected by those laws if you do business in even newsletters in Europe. I also saw a question here. Somebody asked a question about how long do you have to keep your income tax for the IRS. That's an interesting question since I just threw away my. Well, I'm going to give it to Cliff, too, but I'll just tell you. Okay, I'm going to answer it. I'll tell you what I was told, and then Cliff can tell you the real answer. My accountant told me after 10 years, and I shredded 07 day before yesterday. Now I'll turn it over to Cliff to answer it from a legal point of view.
The general rule here is that you should keep all your records, including backup, for 6 years. I advise doing it for 10, so I think Steve is exactly on target there. Never throw away copies of your actual tax return, though. After a certain period of time, it's okay to throw away all the backup, the canceled checks, and all that stuff, the credit card statements, but never, ever throw your return away. I actually had a situation about 5 years ago where the state of New York asked me to produce a copy of my 1973 state tax return when I was 19 years old, and I was able to do it because I had it in a file folder. I had a separate folder for those. Never throw those away. Some quick, short answers. What's the best advice on avoiding an IRS audit? Run your business in a very clean way and keep very, very good records. You cannot prevent yourself from being audited, but you can because they sometimes pick audit companies to be audited on a random basis. Sometimes they do that. So you can't really prevent yourself from getting audited, but if you keep good records, you'll have nothing to worry about. The IRS just wants to make sure that there's backup for all the stuff that you're claiming and that you're not claiming stuff. Advice on using 401k to use money for your business. There is a way that you can do that. Do not do it yourself. There's a company called Benetrends, Benetrends. They're in California, Benetrends.com, that focuses on this. Do it the right way, and always remember this is your retirement money. You don't want to be very careful before using your 401k and eating into your retirement funds to do a business that may not be around in 2 to 3 years. And then the last question here from Mr. Johnson: do you have any experience using? The answer is yes. I do have experience using. When do you decide if you should continue a business or just get a job? Answer is when you're either really, really fed up or you're too old to get a job anymore and you got to strike out on your own, which is why SCORE is here. So with that, I'll send this back to Steve.
Okay, good. Somebody here said, Cliff, you should do stand-up comedy. I'm not quite there yet, but anyway, it's interesting advice. And to just quickly here, David Lee, you came in late. This webinar audio and the slides are going to be at our website under the webinar archives probably in 24 hours, and you'll get everything you need, including the list of the 12 that you asked for. So we're going to stop this now. It's been a really, really good set of questions, a very fast-paced and net what we all need these days. Bunch of content from Cliff as usual. And again, the presentation slides and audio will be available within 24 hours at fairfieldcounty.score. That's our old one. Actually, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Yes. Okay, good for me. So now a reminder. We have our next webinar will be on the 7th of August, and it'll be digital privacy laws, as I mentioned just a minute ago, or as you see it in the press all over the place, GDPR. And, if you're sitting there thinking, well, this really can't apply to me because I do virtually nothing in Europe, you still need to get on board and understand them because that's not the case. So on behalf of SCORE, thank you all for attending today's webinar. A big thank you, per usual, to Cliff Ennico for presenting. This will be the last time today I say this, but please visit fairfieldcounty.score.org and think about attending Simple Steps in Danbury soon. Have a nice day, everybody. Thank you again. Bye-bye.